Hey gang, and welcome back. This week's Conquering Your Commander is going to look at a general that I've been playing a lot and enjoying immensely. This is Titania, Protector of Argoth. Costing 3 colorless, 2 green, we get a legendary elemental with 5 power and 3 toughness. She also comes with 2 handy triggered abilities that revolve around lands, so let's get into that. In EDH, I've often found that when you're playing mono green, you're really basically trying to race everyone into ramping faster and playing bigger threats. Since this is all that you're really trying to do, it's a bit narrow and therefore I don't find it as interesting as some other decks. However, Titania's 2 triggered abilities are what drew me to mono green. Her first triggered ability is pretty straightforward. Whenever Titania, Protector of Argoth enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Seems pretty straightforward. She's basically like a Sun Titan, but only for lands. Her second ability, however, is what really got me going. It reads, whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a 5/3 green elemental token onto the battlefield. This is what piqued my interest. Since in mono green, like I said before, you're often ramping hard and getting a bunch of lands, you now have a commander who actually wants to interact with those lands beyond just casting bigger creatures. Sure, you're still going to run big creatures in Titania, but all of a sudden those land cards are even more valuable. So now that we know what she does, let's look at some ways to build Titania, Protector of Argoth. First and foremost, since this is a land-based deck, let's look at some land. You'll typically find that you'll want to run 40 to 42 lands in this kind of deck. For my own deck building, I find this is actually between 6 to 8 more lands than I'm typically used to. In addition to running so many lands, most of these lands also want to be able to sacrifice themselves, and it should be pretty clear why. For example, with Titania on the field, she turns any fetch land into pay 1 life, find a basic forest, and get a free 5/3 elemental token onto the field. This additional value to things you typically want to do in EDH anyway is just the icing on the cake. All of a sudden, Strip Mine, Dust Bowl, Tectonic Edge, the list can go on. The lands that cost your opponents their powerful lands become not only ways to deal with those lands, but also token generators. There is also a bit of a debate whether you should be running snow-covered forests or typical forests. I will not tell you which to run, as often snow-covered forests can be a bit of a budgetary choice, but I have found that Mouth of Renome is a card that opponents often overlook and can cost them dearly. 2 other lands that come to mind, Lotus Vale and Scorched Ruins, I see in a lot of lists, but I don't run them myself. They're a great way to generate a bunch of tokens with Titania on the field, but I often feel they become a giant target for any Strip Mine or Tectonic Edge an opponent might control. Glacial Chasm should be another consideration as well. The cumulative upkeep can be a pain in the butt, but it does allow for us to stall out our opponents from killing us, and has the added benefit of sacrificing a land when it comes into play. There's one more land that I would recommend, but we'll talk about it later when we get to the combos. I don't currently, but would love to as soon as I get hold of a copy of one, run Azusa Lost But Seeking in my Titania deck. Being able to play 3 lands a turn is huge and will allow us to pull ahead so much faster than our opponents can control. Another worthy candidate, Oracle of Moldiah, allows us to play 1 additional land and manipulate the top of our deck. Since we'll be dropping about 2 or 3 lands a turn on average, Tireless Tracker will do a lot of work in this deck by providing us with a near endless supply of clues which we can use to draw at any time we want. It also doesn't hurt that the tracker gets bigger for every clue we sacrifice. A card I've recently acquired and I'm really excited to try out is Kamal, Fist of Krosa. Typically run as a rattlesnake to punish our opponents for playing any kind of board wipes, Kamal does double duty in our deck by allowing us to animate one of our lands to become a blocker, which then dies and generates a 5/3 token. And let's not overlook the fact that he's an overrun on a stick, provided we have the mana. Last but not least, and the card you'll probably see the most often appearing in any Titania deck, is Sylvan Safekeeper. Acting not only as a way to protect our creatures, Sylvan Safekeeper is able to set up lethal swings by sacrificing all of our lands at the end of our opponent's turn before ours. For artifacts, you're going to want to run the typical Zurin Orb, since it allows us to sacrifice a land at instant speed and generate 2 life. Oftentimes this will be quickly destroyed, so running a backup plan in the form of Claws of Gix, although not nearly as good as Zurin Orb since you have to pay mana to sacrifice the permanent, Claws allows us the redundancy this deck needs. If you are running snow-covered forests, you'll also want to consider running Sunstone. Despite the fact that it can act as a pseudo-fog, it is a bit of an expensive way to get rid of our lands. For sorceries, you'll want to run the typical package of Kadama's Reach, Cultivate, Nature's Lore, things like that. The best sorcery in our arsenal, however, is Splendid Reclamation. There is no better feeling than tapping all of our lands for mana, sacrificing them to Zurin Orb, then bringing them back with Splendid Reclamation, having gained a bunch of life and as many tokens. For enchantments, I would strongly recommend picking up a copy of Burgeoning and Exploration, which have come down in price over the years thanks to reprints. These allow us to play additional lands either on our turn or our opponent's turns and help us get ahead quickly. In addition, Sylvan Library would be a great way to draw some cards, and Elemental Bond triggers off of every elemental token and every time Titania comes into the field. A good catch-all enchantment to have in the deck is Song of the Dryads. It can deal with troublesome permanents that our 5/3 elemental tokens might not necessarily be able to deal with. You will want to run quite a few instants however, and Constant Mists is at the top of my list. Green loves to use its fog effects, and what better way than to keep it in our hand than by sacrificing a land. Realms Uncharted is a green Gifts Ungiven, and very powerful for this deck. Being able to pick 4 land cards and putting 2 of them into our hand and 2 of them into the graveyard where Titania can get to them is a strong effect that we can do for 4 mana at the end of an opponent's turn. And the last instant I want to speak about is Natural Affinity. If you haven't already, I would strongly suggest checking out one of my most recent gameplay videos where I play Titania at the helm. Natural Affinity is the ultimate rattlesnake card in this deck as long as we have Titania out. It might not always be the card that you want to draw, but chances are when someone plays a board wipe you will be happy to have it in hand. And before we wrap things up, I want to go over one little combo with Titania which I think you'll all enjoy. This combo requires you to have 3 cards on the field: Command Beacon, Titania Protector of Argoth, and Food Chain. This combo will generate infinite 5/3 elemental tokens and green mana which can be used to spend on creatures. The process involves manipulating the stack a little bit, so here goes. The first step in the combo is to sacrifice Command Beacon, which triggers Titania. With her trigger on the stack, we activate Food Chain, sacrificing Titania and sending her to the command zone. With Food Chain resolving, we get the mana, Titania's ability resolves, giving us the token. Finally, Beacon resolves, and we grab Titania from the command zone and put in our hand. We now have Titania's converted mana cost plus 1 in green mana to cast her again. Since the land being sacrificed was part of Command Beacon's cost, it is already in the graveyard waiting for us to recast Titania to bring it back. With this in mind, you can simply redo it as many times as you want until the game is over. Well gang, that's my take on Titania Protector of Argoth. I currently love this mono green deck and am playing it to death. Do you have any hidden gems that you love playing in Titania that I should consider? Please let me know in the comments below. Please be sure to tune back in every Monday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for new videos. This video is brought to you in part by my Patreon supporters. If you're looking for a way to help the channel, please look into the link below or the About section. And as always, thank you for watching and please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.